My name is Ryan Tagg. I am part of the sales team here at Dominion Payroll, but I'll be conducting the interview to learn a little bit more about Dr. Cooke and what she brings to Dominion Payroll, aka Shayna.
Thank you.
Right? She didn't appreciate that. Right. So we'll go ahead and get started. Shayna, I did briefly look at your LinkedIn page, as I told you before, and I was kind of surprised about your background. It looks like it's mostly in education, and I personally don't have a background in that, so I'd love to learn more about, how you got started in that, what interested you in that, and kind of what your educational background was.
Sure, that sounds great. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here with you today. So my educational background, right? So I actually sort of circuitously came to that. Every woman in my life, and I mean every woman in my historical life, has been an educator, and so I knew without a doubt that I was not going to be an educator. I was going to break the mold of the Southern family. My great-great-grandmother, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, and it is just, part of, I don't know if it's part of our DNA or what, but I ended up throughout my, younger years, I was coaching, I was tutoring, I was doing a lot of educational focused things. And then I went to University of South Carolina, I got my undergraduate in marine biology. And when I graduated from that program, I ended up in a role as an environmental consultant, making a whopping $19,000 a year.
Whoa.
I was making them big bucks. And so after a little bit of time, I realized that I probably needed to do something different. Even though I loved the work, it was not reasonable for me to be able to stay there. And so I knew I was going to go back and get my master's in education at that point, which I did at the University of South Carolina as well. And that's sort of when I dove into teaching and learning in schools. And so I was a teacher for about 17 years in the classroom, starting in middle school, kind of teaching all the way up through community college, and then settling here in Richmond in high school for the past 6 years of my teaching life.
That's impressive, and to go from marine biology to now back in the Southern family. So you mentioned the Southern family. Where are you from?
Oh well, my married name. I mean, my maiden name is Southern.
Oh, Southern.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, not the
Gotcha.
Southern, but the Southern.
Good to clarify. Well, that's
Thanks
good
for
to
clarifying
know.
that. Right.
And I also noticed that you had a background in kind of the organization behind education, and not just teaching.
Yep.
Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I have two children, so after my daughter was born and was, I guess, 2 or 3 years old, I realized that I was ready to focus more on my career and kind of move out of the classroom and into an administrative position, because I really had and have big opinions on what I think schools could be. And so I really wanted to have an influence on that. And so I was teaching at the time in the independent school system, and most of my career has been in the independent school system. And so I went back and got my doctorate in administration and leadership. And in the last year of my doctorate, I had an opportunity arise to move into an educational consulting role with like a third-party provider called World Leadership School. And so that allowed me to work with teachers all over the world, actually, working on different types of pedagogy, making sure that they are learning how to engage student learning in the classroom and out of the classroom. But I did that for about 4 years, which allowed me to see sort of the back end of education and work with administration. We did a lot of cultural alignment between faculty and administration, and kind of set up for those faculty engagement opportunities for schools. Great.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you see a correlation between your experience in education and what you now come to experience in HR?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it's funny you say that, because moving from the education sector into human resources was really seamless, and it was surprisingly seamless. And so as I was thinking about it, once I entered this space, I realized that the commonality between the two is that whether you are, an educator or in human resources field, your main priority is developing people. Sometimes it's content-based, like in the classroom. Sometimes it's career-focused, like in human resources. And so for me, that was a really natural and easy transition into human resources, and using those sort of skills that I developed over all of those years, working with students and then faculty and then administrators, and now folks in the business sector.
Yeah, the adult children,
the
right?
Adult children,
Right.
yes.
And, so I'm sure schools have been experiencing quite a bit of, number of challenges through COVID as have businesses.
Yeah.
In what ways are you kind of like, are you using your experience in the past to kind of deal with the challenges now? And I mean, I guess open question, how are you dealing with the challenges of COVID as in this new role?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think right now, because my focus is primarily on people, what we are thinking about here is retention, right? Employee retention. How do we keep good people here? Employee engagement. How do we make sure people feel like their work is meaningful? And then a big driver of my whole career, but also of the work that I have done previously and try to do here, is wrapped up in making sure that people feel that they are connected to and have a purpose in the work that they do. And so that piece, I feel like if you feel purpose in your work, you are more willing to invest your time, energy, and love into that work. And so for me, that's very important to make sure that everybody feels that the work that they do is meaningful to them and impactful to the company, so that they are connected to it all the way around.
And you started really right when COVID kind of hit, right? Was it in March? What was
May.
your official May?
Yeah.
So right in the midst of everything, I'm sure it was difficult to kind of build that platform and advance your goals. Now that we have been back in the office for a little bit, in what ways are you trying to achieve that? Providing meaning to the employees. What steps do you take?
Yeah. So when I first started, you're right. Everybody was remote. There was just a handful of folks that were in the office. One of my first things that I did when I started here was have a 15-minute conversation with every employee to find out how long they've been here, like what their professional goals are for themselves, and where they see themselves going in the company. And that was really, all of those conversations helped sort of inform my first steps in this role in terms of what I needed to focus on. And so that transitioned into creating processes and systems around personal and professional development for employees that involved things like creating salary banding and creating promotional tiers within the department, so that employees could see that they actually did have an opportunity to be promoted into another level of learning, or can move into a management position or a project position. And so that was one of the big pieces that I'm still working on now, is like, how do we make sure that everybody has a professional growth plan here and can see themselves here in 3 to 5 years, and what does that look like? And so when we meet with employees now, my team and I will ask them, like, what job here do you want to have in 3 years? And let's put you on a plan so that you're moving in that direction. And so I think that's a big piece of it, is making sure people feel satisfied and that they are on a path and not just kind of swirling around doing the same thing all the time.
And for either a new HR professional moving into a role at a company, or a company that's kind of looking to start over, would you say that that's the most important first step, is just to have that 15-minute conversation with employees?
Yeah, sure, right? Because it's hard to make decisions on what to do if you don't know what people need. And so figuring out, doing a needs assessment on the whole company, person by person, will help you sort of establish your priorities in terms of what are people feeling like is lacking, and what do they really like about what's happening here, and then make tweaks around those pieces as you go, to make sure that the information that you're using is informed by the people that you're trying to impact in the first place.
Very true. And you mentioned the term salary banding.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? I've never heard that before. What does that mean?
So that is one of the first things that I did on top of that, is run a pay equity audit, right? So you look at the entire company and the pay by department, and with years of experience and education and all of those other things. And then you can make changes and modifications to different salaries if somebody has been left behind, and kind of bring them up. And then you create banding within, so there's consistency and equity amongst pay for everybody in the company. And it tells you how to start, right? It also helps with budgeting and knowing how much money you need to hire X amount of heads each year. And so it's really a good way to start, so that you know sort of what kind of financial needs you'll have with hiring, but also where do people fall, and how do you know when you're ready to promote them to the next level.
Gotcha. And so I'm sure, it's difficult now, particularly with COVID, but managing both a budget and then the needs of the employee.
Yes.
And the desires of the employees. I'm sure, I guess one of my questions is, what's the most difficult aspect of your job? And that may be it, I don't know. But how do you balance that? And any tips that you could provide other, either business owners or administrators on how to kind of manage that process?
Yeah.
Specifically with EP, or just in general?
Well, I work very closely with our CFO. She and I partner on a lot of this work, so that I can say to her, I need this, I need X amount of heads for these departments. And she does a really good job of helping us use metrics to make those decisions. And then also to be like, well, we can hire this many people. And so it's not like we just are randomly saying, I need 10 people in implementation, and I need 12 people in client services. We're very clear on the budget that we have, that we know who can fit where, and then how to promote people within, to move people across departments and across divisions. And then that sort of helps establish what we can do. And so I would say having a very good relationship with the financial person is probably really important. And helping them, you know, Robin and I do a really nice job with each other of me trying to humanize it and her teaching the financial piece of it. And so we can kind of meet in the middle with that, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it sounds like collaboration just in general is a really important part of being you know, an HR professional. And you're also a very passionate person. It seems like you have a lot of passions.
That is true.
I've been dying to ask you about the RV, maybe if we have time. I'm going to try to keep this to about 30 minutes. But you know, I just found out you're an avid rock climber. You've just got back from San Francisco. You do a lot of traveling. Tell me a little bit about your passions and what inspires you outside of work.
So I would like to preface that and say I was an avid rock climber.
Okay, well,
I know, I'm not sure how this got out, but I did do, there was 10 years of my life when I was very devoted to rock climbing, and I did climb everywhere. Like I spent a summer in France, and I climbed all across all the different areas that are like mecca for climbing. And so I loved climbing, but really I think I really like to push myself sort of physically and mentally. And so I'm always in those kind of, you know, like rock climbing and whitewater paddleboarding and ultra running, and just trying to like see how far I can push it. Has always been a big driver of who I am. And I think that spills over into my personal life and my professional life for sure. And I do love to travel and explore new places. And I really do think that travel is a great equalizer, right? Like it is very easy to have opinions about people and places when you're sitting in your living room watching them on TV, but then when you go and have coffee with folks or just kind of walk through a city, it just spins a whole new light on what is true about that place.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the culture surrounding it, I guess it's probably difficult to really truly grasp that unless you're there. And you know, Dominion Payroll has a pretty, you know, unique culture here. If anyone's ever visited our office, you can kind of tell Dave, the owner, does have a unique approach.
Yes.
How do you take the passion? So like, you know, obviously not gonna rock climb here, or you could.
We could.
No, you could. But you know, are there anything from your personal life that you're bringing to DP to kind of enhance the culture here? You know, I know that that's particularly important with some of the challenges we've had, but some of the cultural initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest piece of our culture to me is our ability to connect with each other and to collaborate with each other, right? And so I think that spills in on all of those things that we just talked about, is like connecting to people that you work with, connecting to yourself, connecting to your passions. And so culture is huge here. We talk about it all the time, right? Our mission and our values really drive our work. And the culture is one of our biggest drivers. Not only, I mean, certainly it starts with the CEO and the president, but it definitely filters down throughout the company. And so we do things all the time to try to make people feel valued. And some of it is really fun, right? Some of it is happy hours or axe throwing or just doing things together to help connect. But some of that piece of culture also means sending out a benefit satisfaction survey to make sure we're meeting their needs, or sending out a happiness survey to make sure we're meeting their, you know, like their emotional needs as employees, and sort of, again, surveying our teams to figure out where are you and are we meeting you where you need us to meet you, or do we have some work to do? And so I think culture, I always say culture is kind of like a marriage. You can't ever feel like it's good. You can't ever take your thumb off of it, because once you do and you sort of turn your back on it because it is good, is when it starts to fall apart, and then putting it back together is incredibly challenging. So it's best to just stay ahead of it.
That's a great metaphor. And you know, speaking of like challenges, rock climbing, obviously huge challenge. DP, hopefully less of a challenge than, you know, climbing giant rocks in France. But what would you say is the biggest challenge, I guess, that you've faced? You know, you touched on it a little bit, but specifically, I've noticed, you know, working with clients, like hiring is a little bit more difficult. You mentioned, you know, retention. What would you say is the greatest challenge that you personally face, you and your team right now at Dominion Payroll?
Well, you know, hiring and retention would be one of those things. Luckily, knock on wood, we do not have a retention issue. We haven't really had anybody leave during COVID, aside from a couple folks who left for personal reasons. So we are setting up to do a pretty big push in hiring next year. And so with the labor market as it is right now, that does make me a little bit nervous because it's pretty thin. I do hope that it's going to bounce back a little bit, you know, as we as we head through year end, and that people will re-enter the workforce in January and be available for us to scoop them up. Because we do have some pretty big goals ahead of us, and we're going to need some great dynamic people to help make that happen. And so that's one of the big things that we'll be looking for come January.
And what are some of your big goals moving into next year? You know, I know we touched on culture and how important that is, you know, some of the difficulties with hiring. But what is your big, you know, I guess the biggest goal that you would like to achieve next year?
I think one of our biggest projects, I don't know if these would necessarily be goals or projects, or maybe they're a little bit of both, but we want to really develop our internal training program. We currently have like 2 folks in there that do training for our entire company of about 200 employees. And so what we would really like to do is build that up and boost it up. We've created a dynamic onboarding program that is like 2 weeks in length, and it is super comprehensive for new employees. And so we've had a lot of good feedback on that, but we would like to also take sort of that energy and drive and create a rotational and ongoing training program for our internal teams so that they feel like they're set up to be super successful with the work that they're doing and the products that they're selling, and making sure that they feel confident in the work that they do. And so I think internal training is going to be a huge push for us next year. We are also going to be doing a lot of this work sort of around employee engagement and making sure that people are happy and that they feel seen and heard and valued here, and that they want to stay here for a long time. So that ties back into that professional growth, and we're creating cross-training plans across operational departments so that we can easily transition somebody from client services into implementation, or implementation into key accounts, without having to do a huge deep dive into training. So it's more of a natural transition for them. And so that's a big push that we'll be doing as well next year.
So, you know, having knowledge overlap is of
Yep.
course very important. Like to your point, being able to shift people in other roles. Why else is training, like specifically like onboarding? You know, that 2 weeks that you've described.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like that is so important for BP or other companies?
Well, especially with the new onboarding program, by the time people are in their seats and have hit the ground running, we want them to feel empowered that they know what they're doing and that they can make decisions. And I think that's the same thing with internal training. We really want people to be able to critically think themselves through problems, and then also make decisions based off of what they know, instead of having to check in with, you know, somebody that's been here longer or a manager to just. But you can't do that unless you've got a great foundation of knowledge around whatever it is, the product or the service issue. And so setting that foundation of learning first, so that then they can make decisions based off of what they know, will really help everybody in terms of knowing, and then also time management.
Do you feel like that every business needs some kind of like training like that?
Yeah.
Is just
Yes.
yes, yes, flat out, yes, no question about it.
People need to grow. They really do need to grow. If you have stagnant, complacent people, then you are not growing as an organization at all.
Sure, yeah, and I mean, I would imagine having people back at the office makes that a little bit easier.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to get too specific with it, but how have you dealt with the challenges of remote work? I know that is still an ongoing issue, and
Sure.
It seems like it will continue to be an issue for a lot of businesses.
Yep. I mean, we are back, as you know, most people on here probably know, we are back in. We still offer 1 work from home day a week right now. And that seems to be great for the most part. You know, when we transitioned into remote work, there was a lot of hesitancy from folks who said, there's no way I can work from home. I can't work from home. There's no way I'll be able to focus. But they did, and they did a great job at it in terms of being able to balance their time and actually get a little bit of work-life balance back. And it was great. And, you know, it ended up being great. And now people are being asked to transition back in. And it's sort of that same resistance, which is very common to, you know, humans in general, is I don't want to do this again. I don't want to shift again. I like what I'm doing now and I want to stay here. And a lot of companies will say, well, our employees are as productive as they were, you know, at home in the office, and vice versa. And so, you know, we're happy to just stay. But to me, I don't think that productivity and engagement are the same thing, right? And so I think you can be productive, but you can also be disengaged and disenchanted. And when that happens, then that sort of complacency comes to be, and you're not really pushing anymore. You're just trudging along. And if you have an entire company of people that are just trudging along, again, the innovation is going to be none, right? The collaboration will be nil, because it's much more difficult to like reach out and try to connect with somebody than it would be to just walk over to their desk and say, hey, I've got this great idea. What do you think about this? And so I think finding a balance between that, right? One of our core values at Dominion Payroll is balance. We believe wholly in a work-life balance, and that people, if they're not taking care of themselves and their family, then they're not going to be fully present at work anyway. And so finding a balance between that piece is like, how do you still feel like you have the time and space to do the things you need to do for yourself, but then also how can we get you to be here and fully engaged when you're here with your teams and your colleagues and also the work. And so that's where we are right now, is trying to figure out that piece. Like, are we doing it right? In terms of our own flexibility. And so we're doing some deep dives into that as well.
Yeah, I noticed you were kind of like bouncing around the office. I assume this is well after your initial 15-minute conversation, but you were kind of sitting down, looked like you were sitting down with each department.
Yeah.
I assume you were, kind of learning about the day-to-day, what all is involved. Could you tell me a little bit about what that process was for you?
Yes, I can. So on the executive level, we've been asked to really look at a deep dive into the processes and process improvement across each department. And I didn't feel like I was qualified to make any opinions on that, because I didn't really know what our folks were doing on a day-to-day basis. And so I reached out to all the managers to see if I could sit with somebody on their team for 4-hour chunks. And so I just sat with them and I watched them work, and I'd ask questions, and I just wanted to get a feel for like the sense of urgency in the work, the workflow, if it was manageable or not, or if I thought it would be manageable or not. And then also, what were they doing with the clients? What did those client interactions look like and feel like? And so those are the things that I was trying to figure out, so that then I could go back and say, here's what's happening over in product solutions. Like, we don't know that because we don't necessarily see it all the time, but here's what this day looks like for one of our folks, and make some more informed decisions off of that.
In your experience to other businesses, I've never really seen that, I guess, in my career. Do you feel like that? I mean, it seems like that would be a value. Do you think that is something that other businesses should consider doing?
Yeah.
Particularly somebody at the executive level?
Yeah, I mean, I think the further you get away from the work, the more idealistic you get about the work, if that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you did the grind 25 years ago and now you're an executive level of the company, a lot has changed in that 25 years and you've forgotten a lot, right? And so I do think it's important to reconnect with the people that are doing the work on a really deep level, not just a, hey, how's it going? Great to see you, but like, really, what does your day look like? And tell me a little bit more about that. I think everybody should do that, honestly.
And was there anything surprising that came up while you were doing that, while you were learning about the different departments?
Yeah, when I sat in tax, I was like, I have no idea.
Oh gosh.
I was like, even if I was sat with one of our tax specialists who is brilliant, and I told our tax manager, I was like, even if you came to me and said, you have to do this work for today or the whole building, like the company will fall apart, I would be like, well, everybody pack your bags, because we're out of here. There's not a chance I'd be able to do it. But it was so impressive to see her grinding through the work like that. But I felt like that in every department. People were so proud of what they do and the relationships that they have with clients, and so knowledgeable. And it was really inspiring, actually, to sit with everybody and kind of see what their days are like. Yeah,
and so I guess to tag on to that, since you've been a DP over a year now, what is your favorite aspect of Dominion Payroll?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your impressions of the company.
Is it going to be so cliche if I'm like the people? But it really is, right? It is. I mean, I love the people that we work with. I love walking around here and hearing stories and sitting and chatting with folks. And I mean, I love the work too. I love to fix things that need to be fixed, and I love to create systems where they don't exist. And so that to me is great and rewarding. But I also love to just kind of walk around and joke with folks and kind of get to know them a little bit more personally.
Good deal. So I enjoy getting to know you a little bit more too.
Thank
I'm going to save you, not go any further. Try to keep these about 20-25 minutes. As you all know, if you've sat in on any of the webinars, Dr. Cooke, thank you so much for your time. Yes. I won't bring up the RV. That's going to start a whole nother conversation. She also has an RV that I really want to learn about, but I'll ask her later. So I would like to open up this opportunity for any of the attendees that are out there. If you have any questions for either myself, or it's about payroll, I guess, or Dr. Cooke more appropriately, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A or the chat section. We'll give you all just a few minutes. feel free to ask anything. This is open time. Again, we'll have all these recorded if you want to go back and watch the interview again. You're more than welcome. But we also have a number of payroll specific webinars on there also to go through things like our UI and things like that. Last chance. Oh, question. Cool.
Oh.
Janet, what kind of items are included in the orientation training? Great question, Janet.
Yeah, that is a great question. Okay, so we will do a payroll basics course for everybody that that comes on board, and that's like it's like a 4-part course. So we'll do payroll basics, we'll do iSolve basics, we do a DP communication with clients course, so people know like what's expected in terms of how we communicate with clients. They do a lot of department shadowing. Each day they do about 2 to 3 hours of department shadowing, and then they spend some time in university taking some other courses within there.
Gotcha. And I guess I think it's California, New York, and Pennsylvania that currently require like sexual harassment training. Is that something you see moving forward, having more of these requirements for compliance level trainings also?
Yeah, I do see that, and we would like to include more courses along those lines too. We'd love to include some stuff around diversity and inclusivity and microaggressions, and as we continue to build it out, it would be nice to just people to be able to come in and be like, okay, this is what Dominion is all about, and here's what's expected of me as an employee of Dominion Payroll. And do that all in those first 2 weeks. And we have moved to this model of, especially on the operational side, well, on the sales side too, where we are hiring new cohorts. And so it's like every 2 weeks people will start. And so now we've got, 4 to maybe 10 people starting at a time, and they've got their own little group that they go through with. And we have found that from a connection piece that people will stay longer because they have a group that they belong to instead of being the new person coming into an existing team, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. It definitely holds true for me personally. Like, just so y'all know, I started with Chandler and Jack. It was 3 of us that started at the same time, and we really kind of pushed each other, to be successful or at our jobs. And I don't think it would have been as impactful as the lights go out. Bye. Now you're gone. Thanks for the 3 years. But no, it was very impactful being in a group like that.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, sure.
More so than just starting off on your own. So definitely agree with that. And we also have a buddy system that I assume is still in place, which that was here. It's much different now than when I started, but I do like the buddy system. So Jan's kind of tack on is that we also do an interdepartment buddy system. So, somebody will be with sales, it's in operations, and kind of mixed departments so you can know everyone.
Yeah. It's nice. They do lunches, go out for ice cream, happy hours.
I never got ice cream.
Oh, sorry. We've changed it a little bit.
Oh God, it's more fun now. I'm glad I'm still a buddy.
It is more fun for sure.
Any other questions now that we're talking about ice cream and beer? Like all my favorite topics and RVs. All right, last shout outs. Otherwise, I'm going to close it down here, guys. We're at about 1:30. And again, we do these. We're going to do more of these DP meets with the executive team. I think it's a good idea to get to know everybody that works at Dominion Payroll. Shayna, thank you again for visiting with me today. But we'll have more of these in the future. And then I also do a webinar series again, twice a month. It's going to be the second Tuesday and last Tuesday of every month, where I'll either be speaking with an executive team member or introducing y'all to a new solution or reviewing an old solution. So if anybody has any suggestions, just feel free. One more question from Anna. Is there a story for the wall behind me or Shayna? The wall behind Shayna, I think it's more interesting. So we'll talk about that first. That was, gosh, what was the name of the muralist that did that?
I can't remember.
Ed Trask.
Yes.
So Ed Trask did the mural behind Shayna. And then all the employees, I was not here at the time, but all the employees contributed a piece to do the artwork themselves also. I think the funny part of it is he had to come back and fix what they did.
Of course. Wasn't it like a paint by number and they had like drinks and the employees could just go do little.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that involved, but that sounds way more accurate than what I just said. But he came back. So everybody contributed. The story or the map behind me is just Scott's Addition, which I'm sure the roads all look the same. Scott's Addition doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
So unfortunately,
yes.
Update the roads with all the buildings. Hopefully that answered your question, Anna. Any other questions before we hop off? right, y'all. Again, it's going to be the second and last Tuesday of the month. We'll do these DP Discover. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. It's rtag at dominionpayroll.com. Thank you again, Shayna. I really appreciate it. It was great learning more about you. And y'all have a great day. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.